Welcome to the Thought Balloons podcast. I am your host, Jeff Folsham. With me today is a good friend, the second person I ever watched on Twitch, a wonderful watercolor artist and a comic book artist, Tony Moy. Welcome to the show, Tony.
Thank you. Thank you. Who is the first?
Jim Lee.
Oh, Jim Lee. Well, there you go.
Jim Lee. I found, I wasn't really involved in Twitch at all. And then at least 32 months ago, 33 months.
Yeah, yeah, I know. It's been a while.
It's been a while. I found I was just like getting into comic book illustration and stuff. I found Jim Lee's YouTube channel, saw that they were VODs from Twitch, found him on Twitch, and then the first time I watched his stream, he raided you.
Oh, okay. I was about to say, was that the raid?
Yeah, he raided into you. And you're literally the second person I ever watched on Twitch.
Oh, Jim, thank you.
Oh, for real. So, speaking of like discovery of things, how did you get started into art? Like, what was the moment where it went? Like, I'm assuming most people, right? Like, I've talked to a lot of artists on the podcast. A lot of us were like, yeah, slapped a crayon in my hands as a kid.
Yeah.
But like, what was the moment where you were like, no, this is something like I want to do?
All right. So, okay. So, I was in college. I went to school. I went to college for pre-med biology. So I was drawing was kind of a hobby. I enjoyed it a lot. And I was kind of at that point where it's like, okay, well, I have a hobby that I can go on with, in whatever phase of life I'm in. I have this little hobby, and my goal in life, kind of going to college, and you think what you want to do, and my initial goal was to have an impact, to make a difference in people's lives. And my young mind was like, you can't make any bigger impact on someone's life than saving it. Right. During the summers, I did some internships at some insurance companies and whatever. And one particular summer, my boss noticed that I was taking scrap paper from the printers, and during my lunch, I was just doodling. I was like, I'm going to eat my lunch. I'm just going to doodle. There's a lot of scrap paper, blank paper, pencil in my hand. That's just kind of what happens.
Yeah. And
she asked me if I could draw a picture of the Power Rangers for her son and her nephew. And I was like, yeah, sure, not a big deal. So that summer I did, and she was very effusive and thankful. And I drew the white Power Ranger and the red Power Ranger, and they loved it.
Hell yeah.
And then the next year I interned for them again, for a different office, and ran into my previous boss. And she was like, Tony, let me tell you, like, after I gave my son, because we hadn't talked in like a year, spoken in like a year, when I gave my son your artwork, it blew his mind. And ever since then, I've had to buy him. He has his own art table. He's constantly drawing. He's doing these little comic strips now and everything else. And I got to send you some and everything. And I was just like, whoa, like, she was like, yeah, he's all about the art and everything. And he can't stop. Like, oh, he was like, when we moved houses, the last thing he took from his old room was your Power Ranger. And he held it all the way to the new house. And the first thing he put up in his new room on the wall was your Power Ranger. It did not leave his hand. I was like, and that just kind of shocked me a little bit. I was like, I didn't know I can have such an impact on someone's life.
Yeah.
And that summer we just exchanged. He would send me, I remember it was Willie the Whale comic strips. And I would send him like little drawings and sketches back from my lunch and whatever else. Like it was like, he was like an 8-9-year-old kid. And that kind of got me thinking in a different perspective of, wow, I enjoy this drawing thing and I can have this crazy impact on people's lives or whatever else. There's more than it's, just as art. And I just started thinking about this. Art and comics had an impact on my life and helped me to figure out who I wanted to be and role models and all that other fun stuff, right? That comics do. And so that was one of the moments that gave me pause. And my senior year of college, I just really said, you know what, I'm going to focus on drawing and comics and stuff like that. I finished up a lot of my pre-med biology. I took all those classes, but I remember telling myself, okay, every day, 5 days a week, 6 days a week, you're going to spend 4 hours a day, 5 hours a day, 4 hours a day in front of your drawing table. Damn. I don't care if you're drawing or not. Like you're done with your classes, you're studying, whatever, you're just going to sit in front of your drawing table. You might as well do some drawing. But before you go out, hit the parties, go out with friends or do whatever, you're just going to for 4 hours. And then that year I improved a lot and kind of went on from there.
That's amazing. It's very like heartwarming story and spookily similar to the same, like almost the same exact thing happened to me.
Oh yeah.
Just replace Power Rangers with Star Wars characters and remove the part of like the like semi big brother, little brother, like kind of relationship. Like I was working in an office. I was working at my dad's doctor's office, interestingly enough, like medical kind of thing. Downtime in the office. We had one of those old printers that was like a dot matrix printer, and it had like the little like spoke wheels that like fed paper through the thing. And for whatever reason, it always fed an entire sheet of paper through before it started printing. So you'd always rip off these single sheets of paper and you'd be wasting like 10% of the sheets in every single thing. And I just sat right next to where that pile of paper was. So I was just doodling. And one day I drew a picture of Yoda and I thought it was really cool because I just like found a picture on Google, and instead of pencil sketch, I went right to ink, and I was just like, oh wow, this is fun. Like remembering like the fun I had drawing in high school. A coworker saw it and she was like, oh, can you draw a kid? I think it was Grievous, General Grievous, I think is what it was.
Oh, that's a complex one.
Yeah, for her kid. Because that was like his favorite character. And I was like, oh shit, like people actually like think I do good at this.
Yeah.
And so when it came time that my dad was retiring and I had to make the choice of, do I go back to school and get like a certificate to continue working in the medical offices and stuff?
Yeah.
Because the people who like took over wanted me to like actually, have an education.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, if I'm gonna like go back to school for something and like choose a career path, it's not gonna be this. So I went back to school for art. Yeah, it's wild that it was almost the exact same situation.
That
was my mind.
That pile of wasted paper by the printer, I swear to God, is good for something.
It's magical powers.
Yeah. It's changed lives.
So, you're in air quotes self-taught then? Did you like after medical school, did you go to art school, or was it just just hard self-taught labor?
I tell people that I graduated from the school of YouTube. I got every book that I can get my hands on. I took any critique, I amplified tenfold. Anytime someone said, oh, that looks a little funny, but it looks good. I'm like, what looks a little funny? Like, oh, well, just that one little finger looks like, okay, fine, work on hands, got it. I remember going to my first convention, and I felt pretty confident going in, and I had prepped a portfolio. I did a bunch of Daredevil sequential pages, Kingpin, Daredevil, a variety of things.
Nice.
And showed it around one or two, and I got some decent comments from, like, you know, they weren't anyone crazy. It was just like some random small press or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then this Eric Larson happened to be at this show, and for whatever reason, his line wasn't too long. And so I got in it and I said, hey, would you mind taking a look at my portfolio? In my head, I was like, he's going to love it. He's going to give me a job. He's going to say, where have you been? Like, this is going to be awesome. Like Eric Larson, you know, founder of Image, is going to be good. You know, total hubris and confidence.
Right.
He looks at the first page, starts flipping through, and then pauses at one or two pages, you know, it's kind of quiet. Then he kind of looks at me and he goes, and he lambasts me. Anything and everything that he could possibly say was wrong, right? There was no shit sandwich that you're supposed to just say something nice, say something bad, say how you can improve. There was just shit. And he just, I don't know if someone did something to his coffee in the morning or whatever else. And I've since learned that he does this from time to time. He just lets you have it, and it's up to you whether or not you think you can take it.
Right.
And I will say, I was like decimated. Young artist Tony was just like, holy, like backgrounds, hands, eyes, face, perspective, proportions, panel layouts, line weight, anything. I couldn't make a dot on the paper without making a mistake at that point. And I remember after that convention, I just kind of like shell shocked for a little while, and then decided, you know what, this is what you want. Like, take it and go. And so I just started taking some of the things that he said. I remember that, and just, okay, I got to practice this. I got to look at this. I have a long way to go. And so that was one of those moments where it was like, that was a learning moment. And I went back to, I saw, after starting to do conventions and more recently, in the more recent past, did see him at a convention again in the green room, where artists and stuff like that kind of hang out, kind of get away from the convention crowds once in a while. And I just told him, like, hey, you gave me a critique of my portfolio years ago, and he kind of gives me this quizzical, puzzled look, and he's like, oh, where is this going? I was just like, I seriously, you gave me the best, worst critique ever, and thank you. He's like, oh, okay, yeah, no problem. He just said like a few words after that, and I was just like, I'm just gonna leave this be. I'm not gonna ruin the moment.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I am also the kind of person that thrives on that kind of feedback. I was having a discussion with some friends the other day, and they're of the mind that like improvement happens organically, and like you should only like have reasons for it, but like only tell the people like what they're doing well. And I can see why you would say that, but for me personally, it's like I need to know what I'm doing wrong. I'm not like, I feel like I can be introspective and insightful in that way. But when someone's telling me something, I'm a brick wall. Like, if you don't tell me what you mean, I will likely not infer your intention. Right. So like, if someone says you do really good with faces and your body proportions, look good, I won't infer from that my perspective is wrong, that I can't draw backgrounds, or that my anatomy might even be wrong, even if the arms are the right size compared to the torso. Like, I need people to tell me, like, yeah, the way you draw the obliques is like not at all correct, or your serratus interiors are not, like, they don't look right. Like, I need that kind of feedback to be like, oh, okay, now I have a direction to go in. So I really enjoy the story of Eric Larson just ripping your stuff to shreds, because it's like, okay, now I have a bullet point list of what to work on.
Which was everything.
Yeah.
Literally everything. I've taught for many years, and in that I've learned to give critiques constructively and things like that. And sometimes it's not about, hey, here is what you do well, right? Sometimes you could also phrase that as, I can see improvement in this. Right. Like, sometimes people give me a portfolio at a comic convention, ask me to look at it, and you look at it like, okay, what's your oldest and what's your newest? And I won't always necessarily say like, oh, you do great faces or great expressions. I can see improvement on your expressions, but you need to vary them more and go further.
Right.
And there is a shit sandwich where you kind of, I think it's important to, if people ask for it, to tell them where their weaknesses are.
Right.
And I always generally try to focus it on the pieces. In this piece, this area is weak. This hand is wrong. I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm saying that, well, for whatever reason, your lapse in focus on this piece, this piece has a messed up shoulder, right? And so it's very easy. So that's a way to like distance from the person, from the artist, from the piece, and you help them do that. And then you give them an idea on how to improve. Like, okay, hey, the muscles on this shoulder actually look like this. They connect. It's not an action figure where you snap on a shoulder onto the torso. There's this muscle that connects across, this joint, and here's how muscles work and stuff like that.
I enjoy that kind of feedback. Like, it's definitely encouraging to know what you do right. But like I said, being a brick wall, I need to also know what I'm not doing right.
It is important to get, if you're going to grow, and that's why some people need the classroom structure, or going to school. I'll never impugn someone be like, oh, self-taught versus, some people have the honesty or the ability to kind of be honest about their own work and see the things. Sometimes it's hard, that need improvement, and that's part of the levels of learning, right? You got to know, at some points you don't know what you don't know, and as you learn more, then you know what you don't know. If you pause really and think about that, it's like, oh, I don't know this, but before those stages, that's where instructions kind of comes in and helps you out.
Yeah, I'm in the, like, having a fine arts degree in illustration, I'm of the mind that group critiques and access to a teacher that you can actually talk to was the important thing about the school structure for me. It wasn't necessarily the lessons or anything like that. You can learn those things online. You can learn those things through books. You can do it yourself. But I think the difficult thing to do by yourself and online is finding a mentor who can work with you. And again, this is just for how I learn. Like, it's good for me to discuss things with somebody. I can ask questions like, well, why is it like this? What's the purpose behind doing it like this? Because I'm not the kind of person, I lack faith in everything. Like, I am a skeptic. I want to know the reasoning behind a certain thing. It's not enough for me to just, this is how you do it, go do it. Like, I'm like, but why can't I do it a different way if it's better? And if someone can show me the logic behind something, then I can evaluate that particular reasoning and say, okay, that is better than my way, or that isn't, and I can make that decision as an artist, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then group critique. I think evaluating other people's artwork has helped me evaluate my own artwork as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Learning how to actually break down a piece.
Yeah.
But yeah, technical skill and things like that, definitely easy to do in our YouTube era, right?
Yeah. It's a skill that I think new artists, versioning artists will eventually learn, but you have to be active about it. Hey, you see some art out there, we're indulged with arts everywhere we look on the internet, right? You can find it easily, but it's to ask the question, why do I like it? Why does this appeal to me? You know, why do I think this is cool, or why do I want to put it on my phone background and stuff like that? Like, if you it's not just, oh, I really enjoy this, it looks really cool, and therefore I want to copy it and learn from it. It's being critical and asking why. And that was something that I kind of, you know, with my science background, it was always, you know, you have a hypothesis, you have a why, you're trying to find the reason. I'm a little bit like you. Why does this work? You know, and you know, I think that is something that we eventually get to that point where we're like, oh, I know exactly why this sings to me and what I like about it, and then you take that aspect and you make it a part of yourself and your style, whatever that would be.
Right. Yeah. And that's exactly like what those group critiques do for you, is it gives you practice in asking those questions. It's funny you bring up the style. I think it was Jim Lee. I think it was on a stream or like one of his videos. I'm pretty sure it was Jim that was saying, like, to develop your own style, you ask those questions about other people's artwork. Like, what do I like here? I was like, oh, I like the way this person draws eyes. So you try and draw eyes like that person because you like the way they draw eyes and you want to draw eyes like them. But you might not like the way that person draws noses. So you find a different artist that draws noses the way you do like, and you try and draw the nose like that person. And over time, you're like creating a Frankenstein like monster of other people's like little bits here and there. And through that process and time, it just becomes your style, because you're going to alter a little bit how you draw those eyes or the nose, and it's not going to look exactly like the other artist. But you know, that's where people start to say like, oh, I can really see the influence of such and such in your work. And it's like, because I studied the shit out of their art because I liked it and I wanted to draw like that.
Style is simply an amalgam of all your likes and also what you don't like. People, I still feel slightly awkward once in a while when people are like, oh yeah, I saw this and I can totally tell this is your style. I'm like, it is. I like, in my head, I still don't have a style. In my head, it's you know, a little bit of Jim Lee here. It's a little bit of Sienkiewicz here. It's a little bit of David Mack here. It's a little bit of this here. A little bit of that here. Little bit of Mark Haley. It's a little bit of everything I like. And as I'm drawing, sometimes like, oh yeah, so and so did something like this. I like how they did broke down the shapes of the hand. So I'll do that here. But
yeah, speaking of hands, this, I don't know why this popped in my head. I like drawing hands themselves with rounded fingertips, but if you're wearing gloves, I put squared off fingertips.
And then those are one of the things that like I know when I have trouble drawing hands, I just put gloves on them and I'm able to sort of see like, oh, a finger has 3 dimensions, it has a side, here's where the seam of the glove would go, right? And that helps.
It does. That seam really helps define the planes of the hand. Another thing like that I learned in school was, this is just more for the art nerds out there, a practical tip of learning how to draw the shape of a hand. Get a gym sock, put it over your hand, and draw the shape of the sock over your hand. make a
That's a
fist,
good one. That's a good
stretch
one.
out your fingers, like put your hand in all the different positions, and you're gonna see how basically it helps you like define the planes of the hand, because you're not looking at the hand anymore, you're just looking at a solid
At
hand.
this blob.
That was actually a
That's a
really
good one. I like
fun it was a really fun exercise that I did, well beyond the actual lesson. Like I was
Nice.
like, oh yeah, this is going to become part of like my weekly
Yeah,
practice.
yeah. I might try that, or at least visualize that
Yeah,
moving forward in the future. And when I have some issues.
yeah, that's a fun one. The other thing for any artists out there listening who like that sort of um or should not like, for those artists out there who get discouraged by their quote unquote mistakes, I like the old adage of your style is just the conglomeration of mistakes that you make consistently.
Mhm.
Because, like, in air quotes, the correct way to draw would be drawing very lifelike, photorealistic
Right.
representations of things.
Right. And that,
Whereas comics don't look, not all of them, they don't look photorealistic. So
yeah.
you're making mistakes, but they're intentional or they're consistent mistakes. And personally,
I would also throw in, next to the word mistakes, is shortcuts.
shortcuts, yeah, that too.
Or all the shortcuts that you
Mhm.
tend to make.
And I know that personally, like, I get very self-critical,
Yeah.
and just that particular line hasn't made me less self-critical, but it has made me more self-forgiving as
Oh
well.
yeah.
Like it's improved my endurance to learn, and it's also like, well, if I don't get it exactly right, but it looks cool, then maybe it's just a stylistic choice, or something like that. Like if it looks cool and it's representative of what I want it to look like, even if it's not photorealistic, like I'm no longer beholden to that ideal, which I think
Yeah.
is encouraging.
Yeah.
um but moving on here, just check the time. Yeah, we got some time in the first section here. Moving from learning and drawing like with pencil drawings and sketches and stuff,
Yeah.
when did you like, what was the process of just beginning and like ending up with watercolors as like your main thing? I think we all have
Yeah.
like that a moment or something. Like for me, when I was talking about the Star Wars thing, I did it in ink, and ever since then I love
Yeah.
working in black and white.
Yeah. Prior to anything color, I spent a long time just doing black and white, pen and ink, being a penciler and an inker.
Mhm.
That's all I did. And if you caught me during that phase of my life career, I would have just told you, I just see lines, I just see the world in black and white and gray. And color mystifies me, baffles me, confuses me. I don't know how to do it.
That's exactly how I feel.
Yep. And I had done, you mess around a little bit with some markers and things like that, just to kind of do sketchy things, but nothing really finished or complete. I spent a little bit of time, doing web design and stuff like that. So Photoshop became a friend, and you're doing design and doing basic colors and stuff like that. And you get into a little bit of digital coloring, but it was more digital coloring, not digital painting. But I did explore a little bit into that for a small period of time. And then about 7-8 years ago, I had a particularly trying year personally. Everything from relationships, work, family, everything was just a tumult.
Right.
The only thing I had to exert a little bit of control back over it was just like, okay, well, I'm just going to start drawing a little bit more. Prior to that, I was I was focused on the combination of teaching and an office job. And so I had kind of put art away to the side a little bit for a little while. And during that year, I just kind of felt this creative need to explore. And at first I tried some markers, acrylics, more digital painting. It's a short little thing, like trying to figure out oils, and I would just go out and try to do this stuff. Color pencils. And I had made some friends in the comic industry. Ben Templesmith was one of those friends. And at a show, I was kind of helping him out around his table and hanging out with him. And I saw him, he brought out a small little palette of watercolors, and he does these wonderful ink washes, black and white stuff. And then he just kind of splatters some color on there. And then someone had gifted him a bottle of wine, and he painted some with the wine that he snuck to him at the convention. I remember this, and I was like, people loved it, and I looked at it like, oh, well, that's cool. Like, maybe I should try that. And that I tried some watercolor, went out and bought like a $30 set of watercolors not too long after. And the best way I can describe it is that my attempts at exploring all the other mediums ended in kind of frustration. Mm-hmm. Watercolor was the medium that at the end of the day, I was like, I'm going to figure this out. It just didn't, whatever it was, it didn't deter me that I wasn't good at it. It was like, no, right. I'm going to figure out, like, why doesn't this work? And I think possibly it was just the exact opposite of my pen and ink work at the time and pencil work, where you're trying to find that one right line when you're inking, right? You're like, okay, this is the line and that's it. You got to make the decision and there it is. There's the line. Whereas the watercolor was just like, here's the puddle. Is this the right puddle? I don't know, but here's the puddle on my paper. So that I think was the dichotomy of the two perspectives that I had on art were just so conflicting that I just wanted to figure it out. It was intriguing to me that acrylic or oils or digital art, digital painting didn't quite pique that interest for whatever reason. So that's kind of how I fell into watercolor. And
when you mentioned acrylics, mm-hmm. Do you find it easier to use watercolor versus acrylics because it's a transparent medium?
Mm-hmm. Well, as we kind of spoke before, like I have no formal art education, right?
Right.
I had no idea what a medium was. I had no idea what GAC 142 or whatever the GAC, right?
Yeah.
For acrylics and retardants, and I had no clue. So I was just shooting in the dark, trying to like randomly figure this stuff out. And I guess part of it was the simplicity of watercolor. Is just water, pigment, brush, paper.
Yeah. Right.
Like there's nothing else. But I think I just didn't know what I should know about any of these mediums, right? And therefore, I didn't know what you could do. And conversely, I didn't know what it should do. Right. Some people have said, like, my watercolors, like, I did not know watercolors could get that detailed. And I'm like, I don't know, neither did I. I just tried.
Yeah.
Right?
I just used a small brush. I don't know.
I just used a small brush. Like, no one told me you couldn't.
Right? Yeah.
So I didn't have that watercolor teacher my watercolor teacher just said, get the paper wet and, you work in big strokes and this and this. I'm like, no one told me that.
Yeah.
So I think there is Probably some random fortune where I had to like figure a lot of this stuff out myself, however many headaches that caused on its own.
I know for me, it is about transparent mediums.
Mm-hmm.
Like the thing that really confuses me about color work is choosing the right color. But I'm not bad at mixing colors. Like, I had to do oils and acrylics and stuff in school, and I can like get the color that I want. The thing that I don't know is when I'm inventing things, like what color should it be? But with watercolor, I can mix that skin tone. That is like, I know in normal light, this is what the skin tone would be. I paint the skin tone in, it looks cool. Then I'm like, okay, well, this is a nighttime thing, so I'm going to do a blue wash over top of it. And it changes the color of the skin to a relatively blue shifted tone, right? Like the transparency, you don't have to get the color right on the first time. You can do washes and stuff, which makes so much more sense to me than any of the opaque mediums.
Yeah, I think that is something unique to watercolor, where you're not trying to, create on your palette with oils or acrylics. You're like, okay, here's the color that I need. I'm going to mix it, and that's the color that's going to end up on my canvas, my board, or whatever. But it's about shifting, right? You're like, okay, I'm going to put this down, and I know I can shift it a little bit cooler. I can shift it a little bit warmer. I can shift that purple to the red, or I can shift that purple to the blue. If I'm not, if I don't put it on too heavy. Right. And I think that process and having to, and also the process where in watercolor, you can overwork it just as easily, right? Because you can't erase, and it is transparent. You can't be like, oh, well, I want to erase this, right? I want to go over this, where you can with acrylic. So you have to be cognizant of where you want to go, and you're not trying to figure it out on your palette or on your canvas, right? You have to have an idea of your destination and why you're getting there. And so I think with watercolors, those are some easier lessons to learn.
Interesting. That's interesting. It makes me think about some of the things I've said on streams in the past. Like, I typically like to do something. I try and do it once a month. Sometimes it's hit or miss, but I like to do 15-minute time drawings that are requested by people in chat. And I just, they request something, and I'll just whip out a drawing, and people will be like, how do you do that so fast? And thinking about it was something where I will compose the thing in my head first. Like, I'm pretty good. I'm not the best, obviously, but like I'm pretty good at visualizing the final thing and then doing it. So I wonder if that's also why I like watercolors, is like I can visualize the thing that I want and I can just kind of do it. And that's, from what you just said, seems very important in watercolors, is to know what you want to do before you do it.
Yeah, there's one of the things I learned with watercolor is confidence, right? I think that's more of what it is. It's like, okay, this is the direction I'm gonna do. I have to be confident in what I am doing and why I am doing it, right? There's no, the alternative is to start over, right? People inquire whether, like, how to get started or what they can do to improve their watercolors, and the first thing I kind of tell them is draw. You have to draw strong enough. You have to have strong enough drawing skills so that you are not worried that that eye is might not be in the right place. You have to be confident in those strokes that you put down, that your anatomy is correct or whatever else is there. Like, if it's not, then you're going to struggle and you're going to overwork, or you're going to not figure it out. So I think confidence in watercolor is a lot more important of a trait in the artist than it is in in some of the other mediums, kind of inherently. Because if you're not confident in something in oil, like, oh, let me just try it a little bit here. No, that's not right. That's totally, I don't want to go with that green light. I'm just going to change that to purple.
Right.
Can't do that at all, right?
No.
You have to be like, oh, I'm going with a green light. It's either green or purple. I can't shift it.
Yeah. Well, speaking of confident, I'm confident that our listeners will like these sponsored messages as we go into our break here. Listen to these, Anchor FM. We got our standard, legendcraft.ca and, my patreon.com/FolshamArt. Learn all about it. We will be right back with Tony Moy. Do you want to class up your gaming? Are you sick of card tables and cheap plastic sleeves for your character sheets? Do you like real wood and are convinced magnets are the only magic we have left in our current age of science? Then head over to legendcraft.ca to spruce up your tabletop gaming setup. They offer felt top gaming tables with add-ons like cup holders, tablet holders, dice trays, roll boxes, and more. Newly released in January 2021 is their Magna Tracker system. With versions for both health and spell tracking, these sleek and stylish tracking boards come with magnetized tracking pips that allow you to slide them back and forth along clean-cut channels, making tracking your health and spell slots easy to use and read, all without the constant erasing and writing on your character sheet. And did I mention that both the Magna Trackers and the tables are customizable and personalizable? That's right, your table and or Magna Tracker will be one of a kind when you order at Legendcraft. Legendcraft is partnering with me to offer you a 5% discount on your orders at legendcraft.ca. That's right, you can get a 5% discount when you enter the code F_ART at checkout. That's F_art. Go to legendcraft.ca. That's legendcraft.ca with discount code F_art for 5% off. Legendcraft.ca. Order today. If you like this podcast and would like to support the show, head over to patreon.com/Folsham_art. As little as $1 per month, you not only support Thought Balloons and get to submit questions to be answered by myself and the guest host, but you will also have access to my webcomic 3 to 4 weeks before they're released to the public and my weekly update blog. At higher tiers, you'll gain access to full issues and short story comics, and you can even see progress and add input to projects I'm working on. That's patreon.com/FOULSHAM_ART to support Thought Balloons today. Welcome back to Thought Balloons. We are sitting here with Tony Moy talking about art and stuff. Before the break, we talked about how you got started into art, choosing watercolors. You had talked about going to a comic convention and getting your portfolio looked at. And I know there is something that we have talked about and you have hinted about a little bit in your streams, is that you are currently working on a graphic novel of your own, if I could be so bold as to use that heady of a term to describe it. That is something that I'd like to talk about, because I'm currently also in the process of writing and drawing my own graphic novel, and it's always fun to share notes and compare stages of the process with other comic artists. So what's your comic all about?
Well, I was working on one that was probably more fantasy related and stuff like that. Big grandiose ideas of
right. That's the one we had talked about.
Probably
last year at this point.
Yeah, of demons and zombies and dragons and all sorts of craziness, and spaceships and whatnot. Then and I had made some progress on it, and I had gotten to the point where I had plotted out most of the, I guess what would be considered the first episode or issue.
Mm-hmm.
And then sort of later 2020, early 2021 happened where just a lot of talking about sort of the political and kind of getting to that stuff now.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of violence towards Asian Americans started
right, yeah.
getting more notoriety and more into the news and things like that. And as a Chinese American, this kind of perturbed me. My up until recently, I had a grandmother that was very proud of the fact that she would still go into work and take the train, and she was very active later in life. And it was these elderly people that were getting like, beat up and killed and stabbed and sliced and punched and whatnot, just crazy stuff out there. So I started, I have this project, this other side project where I'm doing like portraits, watercolor portraits of my own personal heroes and people, role models and things like that. And I decided to go into a bunch of, Chinese American, Asian American sort of figures in history, and I allow myself to use my art to speak for me sometimes, and try to think of ways to have my art speak as an artist. And it's not all about creating the cool looking Batman and stuff like that. I love it, but sometimes I have to, okay, as an artist, if I have something to say, I allow myself the ability to say it, to put that out there. In that process of researching and learning about it, I came across a documentary, and I learned about, you inevitably get to the point where you learn about the Japanese internment camps of World War II, right? Horribly tragic. And I thought I knew my basic history about it. I was like, okay, yeah, this is horrible. It sucks. But what I didn't know as I started delving deeper into it was that there was this movement of young Japanese Americans that decided, even though that their government was still was putting them into these, internment camps, they decided they would want to go and fight for that same government overseas, and against their enemies, and do whatever, right? And so there is this creation. They're called the 442 regiments. 442 regiments separated. That was composed of entirely Japanese Americans from Hawaii and from the West Coast and from the U.S. And what I didn't know in all of my history and learning, so that to this day, this regiment is the most decorated regiment in all of the armed services in the United States, in all of our history. World War I, World War II, Vietnam, Korea, this regiment of Japanese American soldiers have far and beyond silver stars, medal of honors, gold stars, and everything. They just blew it out of the water. And all of a sudden I was like, whoa, I never knew about this.
That's awesome.
And I started delving into it, and there is just some amazing stories. And I was like, why isn't this a movie? Why isn't this a comic? I started thinking of like 300 and like some of these, they're literally, they're sent on missions that they're basically like, well, these other regiments failed at this mission. Might as well send our Japanese people in there because why not? And they would go and they would kick ass and suffer losses, but they would do what needed to be done. They would take that hill, take out that machine gun. They would free that. There were some of the first ones into Dachau, were Japanese Americans that liberated some of the Holocaust survivors. So this was a part of history that I had never knew of. And as an Asian American, this really, and with the what was kind of happening out there in society, kind of, I was like, you know what, I'm going to do this. I'm going to sit here. I'm going to research. I'm going to find the books. I'm going to find the documentaries, and I put together, and I have a basic premise of a script that I'm starting to put out there.
That's cool.
Laid out, and I'm going to do it as a webcomic, so I'm going to put it out there for free.
Nice.
And so I have the beginnings of it penciled, and I'm going to try to get that first episode, as it were, done, penciled at least, and lettered and stuff like that this month, and maybe do some samples with watercolor, digital, pencil, inks, whatever the medium seems appropriate. I will use for the scenes, and there's some crazy stuff that as I peel back the layers of the onions, I'm just like, dude, this is. I don't know why this wasn't a movie, but like there's some crazy shit going on there.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
I really appreciate the like shining a light on things that don't get a light shined on them too frequently. Like in my comic, it was just supposed to be a fun fantasy adventure and like completely devoid of any true meaning other than escapism. Yeah. And then back in the Clinton-Trump election, a friend of mine said that she was voting for Clinton, not for any like policies or anything. And it wasn't that it wasn't like, I'm voting because I hate Trump that much or anything. The reason she was voting for Clinton was that she wanted her daughter to grow up in a world where she knew for a fact that being president was an achievable goal.
Right, was possible.
And that has stuck with me so strongly that through Twitch and meeting a bunch of people, getting involved with like communities of people all across the world, it's really kind of changed my viewpoint on like what I can do as a storyteller as well.
Right.
And so now I have changed a few things in that fantasy adventure. It's still fantasy. It's still like an adventure story, but
now you have something personal to put into it.
Like I came into this realization of, well, not every, like I was writing from my own perspective for a long time. And I was like, well, not every character has to be a guy. Like I'm a guy and I know that perspective and I can write my truth through those characters, but not every, like it does. If I was like looking at characters, like, well, that character doesn't have to be a guy. That could be like just a strong female role model. And like, it just started snowballing of like, there are so many like friends, like personal friends that don't get representation. And I've like talked to friends about this and I just like, you know what? Fuck it. I can do the representation that I want my friends to have. Right. And it all stems back to that, like a young girl growing up in a world where she knows that being president is like a thing. And now we have like Kamala Harris, like vice president is like one step away, we're heading there. And like to be a part of that, I think is so important. And it's really awesome to hear like you taking your own personal history and like creating a story that is going to provide a bit of representation for people who honestly are underrepresented in media,
or just simply don't know the impact. And that was one of the things where I did like the portraits of people, where I was like, okay, well, I know it's easy to kind of get out there on social media and just lambast, the racists and scream and yell and whatever. I was like, well, let's not just impugn. Yeah, we should point the fingers at those who are and try to identify the issues that can help change this. But like, let's also highlight, the positive role figures and role models in our history that have also made an impact. I am Pei, who is a Chinese American architect. He was actually from the small little province that my family is from in China. You know,
Cool.
he designed the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Ohio.
Nice.
You know, he designed the pyramids in the Louvre that you see. Like that's the you see in every movie that you see the pyramids.
Yeah.
Those glass pyramids. Like he was the one that architected it and designed it, and they asked him to do something, and that's what he came up with. And I was like, and that was even something where I was like, oh, I knew he was Asian. I didn't know he was actually Chinese from my area.
Yeah.
And, that beyond just the typical Bruce Lee and everything else.
Right. Yeah.
Those to highlight, I think, accomplishments is a challenge nowadays because it's so easy to point fingers and to impugn things that we don't agree with or that we don't like. I think that's the harder thing.
I don't think I've ever said it so succinctly, but I've tried to make this point before. It's not enough just to cancel things. That creates a void. You have to also create the change you want to see. You have to fill the void, right? Pointing fingers and canceling problematic people is only half the battle. You then have to fill that gap with unproblematic messages, right?
Yes.
You have to fill that void with positive energy as well. And it's really awesome to know people and be in a community where that is more of the focus. Like I feel very lucky to know people like you, people like Friendin, who's an artist on Twitch, a lot of people who I hang out with either in streams or on Discord calls or whatever. I feel very lucky to be in a community where instead of just crapping on people and complaining about things, the community is about positive reinforcement and putting things out in the world, and and I think it's so important.
Yeah,
that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, and I think that's something that the time and the environment that we live in today, we have the capability of putting things out there.
Right.
And no other period of history has it been so easy to put something out there publicly. Whether it gets disseminated is a completely different matter, whether it sticks but you want to make something public that sticks around, that can be searched in Google or whatever. You have the ability to do that without having to buy a printing press and a newspaper or whatever, you can get it out there, whatever your message is for good or for bad. Right. And we've seen both sides of that in the past year, especially. But I think it's a very important thing. And that's why, as a creative and as an artist, I'm sure we have that ability that some people do not.
Right.
Out there, or that haven't taken the time to grow that ability to create something that is more than just expletives and a comment on a post in a tweet.
Yeah, exactly. Something I'm going to throw this question at you. You may not have an answer, and that's fine.
Oh yeah.
But something that someone asked me the other day, just in the course of our conversation, was, what do you want your legacy to be? Like, if you had control over how people remember you and your work, like, what would that be?
That is a good point, because that's a good question. I think at the end of the day, I would like to have, one of the things that I'm very proud of is when I do feel very accomplished, is when people come up to me and they say, you've inspired me, or your artwork did this or X or Y or Z. It motivated me to try, and I've watercolored because of you, and I saw this, and it speaks to me, and I just want to have this print on my wall and motivates me or whatever. Like all those sort of positive interactions is that I hope that my legacy is that some of my art, more than just being a very cool, pretty Batman or whatever else, withstands the test of time. And then, people that when people see it long after I'm gone through the power of the internet, go, oh, this is something really cool. I wonder who the artist was. And they take the time to look up and find out who I was. And hopefully by then I have a Wikipedia page. but and they learn a little, like, oh, this guy was pretty cool. And that the artwork that I create inspires 100 years from now, some other artist that looks back and goes, this was really cool.
We can do some of that groundwork. We can make that Wikipedia page. We'll make that Wikipedia page. It'll be a picture of you and a link to this podcast.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. I've told myself that I am not going to be the one that creates it. Like it'll happen at some point organically.
Yeah.
I have to just focus on whatever it is, and it's one of those like random milestones where you're like, maybe I kind of got somewhere.
That's cool. I've never thought about what it would mean if one day I Googled my name and Wikipedia entry about me popped up. It'd be weird. I would be compelled to edit it for sure. I'd be like, nope, this is wrong. Let's change this. Oh, nope, this is wrong. Annotate, go to the bottom.
Right.
I edited this. The person whose article this is about. No, I was not born in North Carolina. I was born in South Carolina.
Yeah.
Stupid little things like that. But yeah, that's cool. I had a similar answer to that. It's just like a positive kind of like message out there. For me, it was like, I've said this for many years. I think I talked about it in the first episode when I was talking about I did a solo podcast about myself. But long story short, I ate some mushrooms, talked to the universe, and the universe told me don't be an asshole. And ever since then, I've just been like, it's like ruminating on that message. And like, there was like some other things that I, came to conclusions during that time. Was just like, we're all just people. Like, it doesn't matter, race, religion, sex, gender, anything like that. Like, a human being, we're all cousins. We're all family on this planet. And that's the legacy that I want to leave, is like a true, like, even playing field for anybody and everybody. Which is why, like, I felt compelled to be like, oh shit, I have friends who talk to me about how like they feel underrepresented because of whether it's their religion or race or gender or whatever. I want to tell stories. I want and you tell stories about characters. Why not have those characters be representative of the people that I care about in my life, or the groups that they like feel that they're a part of.
Right.
And the whole legacy thing is it's a pressure, nothing says we're going to achieve it, but it gives you something to work towards at least. Right. And I don't know. That conversation was something that it only happened like 2 weeks ago, so it's been on my mind a lot, and I'm the kind of person who obsesses and overthinks about things. So I've been asking people that question recently to see what their answers are as I obsess over it.
You started off on a good point where it's like, I just don't be an asshole. But sometimes that's a very active choice you have to make.
It is. You're like, it really is.
Don't be the asshole. Don't be the asshole.
I right after that experience, I joked about creating Jeffism, like a religion. And that would be the only commandment, and there would be no there'd be no punishment. Like, I don't like screw like do good or else you're gonna burn in hell. Like, nah, just don't be an asshole. And I think it covers everything from if you murder someone, you're an asshole. If you take advantage of someone, you know,
You
like
steal,
sexually, if you
right.
steal, if you lie, like you're just being an asshole. Like, just don't be just be a nice fucking person. Like, that's the only rule you need to live by,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and you'll feel better about yourself. Right?
Yeah.
That's there. You go. You don't need
Even
fire
if
and
in
stone.
those moments where you're really struggling, even in those moments, even if that positive feeling is a bit petty, where you're just like, well, at least I'm better than that guy who is an asshole. Hey, you're at least you're not being an asshole. Like, your
Yeah.
motivations don't necessarily need to be pure either.
Right,
Like,
right. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you there.
Yeah.
I'll be a member.
Hell yeah. You'll be my first parishioner. It's the same sermon every week. 3 words. Don't be an asshole. All right. Goodbye. Further frees up your Sundays.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Got it. I almost forgot. That was the. I'm glad you reminded me.
Hey, you know, sometimes you need a reminder.
Yeah.
But yeah, getting back to the comics, you say you're in the writing process. Then
So I've so it's a combination of writing and research as I try to figure out
gotcha.
what line to toe. So I have to do some experiments. Like you were talking about World War II here, right? And so how bloody, do I take my knowledge of pre-med biology back in college where I learned all this stuff, and do I actually apply some of that into it, right? How accurate, like there are some crazy stories of Daniel Inouye, who ended up being our first Asian American senator out of Hawaii after the war. I never knew his story. He was part of this Japanese American 442nd Infantry Troop. His team was tasked to take down a series of machine gun installations, turrets, right? And so they charge it essentially. At some point, he realizes his team is not behind him. He grabs the grenades that he can, manages to take out 2 of these machine gun turrets with the grenades. He gets an RPG launched at him.
Jesus.
He gets hit, or he gets caught in the explosion. He looks down on the ground and sees his arm, which is blown off, and the arm is holding a grenade. And so he grabs that grenade, that final grenade, and manages to take out that third installation of that machine gun installation from the Germans on this hill. Obviously, that ended his soldier career, but he survived that. And I kind of knew of him as like American Asian American politician, and he always faced one direction, and I kind of, okay, it looks like he's missing an arm, but I never knew the story why and how. Yeah. That one story, like, do I actually say him? Do I talk about the actual people that died, that survived? How accurate do I want to be? Do I combine, I'm going to be inspired by real life things, but there are a few actual characters like this Daniel Inouye that you can put in there that probably, need to be in there. And, that's kind of where I am right now is I have all these little stories that I've done through research and read some books, which is kind of why I've kind of fallen off some of my social media a little bit, because I'm just like, I'm reading these books, listening to audiobooks and everything else, and taking notes. It's kind of like being back in school. I'm like, okay, I gotta take notes. I can't just let it go in my head. And to figure that stuff out. So that's kind of where I am. I have the prologue / intro chapter 1 kind of a thing written out. There are some very interesting bad guys to kind of put into this whole thing beyond the just Germans and Nazis and stuff like that.
Right.
but bringing in like racism and how that impacted the whole military decision-making process and things like that. So
are you at a point where you have like an idea of like the overall length, or are you still in the needing to figure out what the whole story is?
I know the story that I'm going to start on. There's a few chapters in the lifespan of the several years that the 442 infantry was active. There is one particular scenario where they rescue what's called the Texas Battalion. This Texas Battalion gets caught behind enemy lines. And there have been several attempts to try to go rescue them. The Germans are using that. Like Hitler kind of said, "I want this Texas Battalion taken out." Like he was, he knew what was happening in this particular case. And 2 other battalions of U.S. troops tried to rescue this Texas Battalion, and they failed. And the 442 was sent as sort of a last-ditch effort. And they basically went in and saved the day. So they go and they manage to find the lost Texas Battalion. And there's some really cool moments in history where you're like, this is a movie right here.
Yeah.
So the first Japanese guy that manages to find this holed up Texas Battalion that they're held up on the top of this hill, the first Japanese guy that manages to see them, walks in through the mist and smoke and goes and looks at the lieutenant after they've been trying to survive on bear rations and everything else. He kind of looks at him and he goes, "You want to smoke?" That literally from the Texas Battalion, that lieutenant in his memoirs, that's what he said. And then from the other side, he's like, "Yeah, just kind of like, you want to smoke?" Like that's what he said. Like that's a scene. Like you have to put that in.
Yeah, that is.
After days of fighting, being the Germans back, surviving through hell, and you're gonna go, "You want to smoke?"
It's that perfect example of that phrase. You can't write this stuff.
Right. You can't write this stuff. And so like there's all these little things like how much can I not write? How much do I have to
right.
include?
Yeah.
So I that is the chapter that I want to kind of focus on. And there's so much that happens within those 4 or 5 days. Of 4 days, 4 or 5 days where the Texas Battalion was lost, and this Japanese battalion goes in and tries to save them and find them. Mind
is just like, you talk about like 4 or 5 days, and I'm just reminded of like a few things that I've seen. Like, I forget the specific story. I can't remember if it was the Tom King or if it was the Scott Snyder run on Batman, but there was like a story that like took place over like 2 or 3 days, and it was marked down to the minute in the panels. And I could see something like that. Or like there's like a couple ones with like the Flash where it's like second by second and he's doing all this crazy shit.
Yeah.
Like obviously it's not a superhero story, but like comics is like really fun to play with the flow of time and stuff.
It is. And so like there is I think it was released in the 90s where you actually have what was the timing of what was said on the radio and what was actually done. They and the actual troop movements and stuff like that. So a lot of that stuff came out a few decades later, but I know exactly like where they were, what hills were happening and what was going on. And so you can go minute by minute, but you also want to go back into and make sure that you juxtapose what's happening in the US, what's going on in these internment camps, these people, like as this soldier gets shot in the head, what his family kind of is going through, and what he went through to make the decision to come all the way over, fight for a country, get shot in the head. you know, and and he was just amazing stories, and you're just like, okay, I have to decide what not to tell is almost just as of a challenge in this case.
Yeah, yeah. The research phase is so fun, and I was excited to read like the fantasy story that you were telling me about last year, but
Yeah,
this sounds like you found like that passion, and
yeah.
I really feel like I know you're gonna do great artwork, but I really think this is gonna be like just an awesome story to read too.
Yeah, it was an awesome story for me to research. So I was like, okay,
Yeah.
well, all the pieces are there. I just have to kind of put the puzzle together, and identify that stuff, and combine a few names and soldiers and stuff like that, and just and also come to terms and realize that like I can't be 100% historically accurate.
Right.
I am going to take some liberties, and there will be some people that are like, well, this isn't exactly how it happened, and like, okay, calm down.
Yeah, that's why you put it at the front of the book, inspired
Yeah,
by true events. Some things
yeah,
have been altered to protect the people involved, or whatever.
yeah.
And then you
Right.
can do basically whatever as long
Yeah,
as you stay true to the message.
yeah, exactly, and that's a little bit of the challenge that I still have to that I had to kind of realize, and just like, no,
Yeah.
it's okay, don't.
You see that like disclaimer a lot on true crime shows where they say like details have been altered here and there.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, there's going to be people. I think the goal is basically to get to make sure that there's um, something that is accessible about this small element of history in Asian American impact in the United States to people, right? Like no one's going to go in and read the logs of radio transmissions. No one's
Yeah.
as a kid or as a teenager, you're not going to go and read some of the crazy the books that have been written on here. That's not what you're going to do. You're going to you might, however, read a comic on it, and you might, however, read a comic if it's free on the web.
Yeah.
Sort of a thing, and that's also a decision. Like, okay, I'm going to try again. I'm going to try the model, or you put it out for free. You do the Patreon, you do the other residual ways to kind of keep supporting it and everything else. So.
It reminds me a lot of Art Spiegelman's Moss.
Yeah. I've
it's like, of course the Nazis weren't cats and the Jews weren't
right.
mice. That's ridiculous. But it frames it in a way that people can like you get the experience, right? And I think that's more important when we're so far removed from the actual events anyway.
We are,
like,
I mean, almost 80 years ago, right? So,
yeah, and it's something where I think you're never going to please everyone, right? So obviously there are going to be people who are like, this one's not perfectly correct or whatever. But I think so far removed from the actual events, by time, it's more about the messages and the, a general like truthful experience that those people had.
Yeah.
But that's just my opinion.
No, absolutely, and I think you're right. This is something that, as I started reading, like I felt compelled in a certain way. Like even though I am not Japanese American, I'm Chinese American, that it was still a story that made me feel, that filled me with a little bit of pride as well.
Yeah.
I can only imagine that if I do a good job and a good service with it, that it can do the same for an actual Japanese American out there that doesn't know the story or whatever else, and be like, damn, like we were badasses, like they think we're scrawny and slight of build and everything else, but we fucking kicked ass.
Honestly, like it may just be the stories that kind of get filtered through popular culture. But like,
Yeah.
honestly, like Japanese they're pretty badass. They're just
They are.
awesome, you know. They
They
kick
are.
ass,
You get
you
to the
know.
samurai stuff and everything else, but
Yeah, like their whole culture is just awesome, kick-ass people all throughout history.
Yeah, and they're that sort of that Japanese honor,
Yeah,
was sort of put to the test as this Japanese American honor and wanting to prove themselves. So many of these diaries and the little stories where they're like, yeah, like they were sending us on a mission that we might not come back from, and I wanted that mission. I wanted to prove that I deserve this country as well. And to hear them write this and write it in a letter to their parents and families or whatever, however it was recorded, just kind of makes you go, we won't even put on a mask to
right.
help people now these days. You have people that are willing to like, no, that's too much. That's too much impinging on my freedoms. But it's just kind of like, oh, really, this is how far we've come. So
yeah, I definitely man, I'm so excited. Like it's stories of like honor, personal sacrifice. Like those are the kinds of things that I like really, really jive with too. Just in like this stuff I like to consume. So I'm really excited,
Well, when I get the prologue done, when I get the prologue done, I'll have you be one of the in the early test audiences, so to speak.
Nice. Yeah, man. Just like I sent you the copy of the first issue of the comic that I was working on. When because you were suggesting some panels here and there and stuff. So I'm excited to be able to see the stuff before anybody else. But as people heard during the break there, I like to end the podcast with questions from our Patreon supporters at patreon.com/Fulsham_art. This week we have another question from Patreon supporter Cascadia Studio. It is, what do you think people should know? Pretty nebulous question.
It is a very nebulous question. I'm going through a couple of things in my head, but I think the one thing, at least I'll just put it, one thing that I am glad I learned or know is that you are never as good or as bad as you think you are. And I think with that kind of gives you this little, comes with a sense of like a little humility in these things, like take be proud of your accomplishments, be proud of what you can do and your skills and your and all the amazing things that you can do, but know that that's not the pinnacle of who you are. You'll always get better, and no matter how bad you think you're starting off, like you can always improve, and you're not as, it's all in your head, right? Like in your head when you're starting off as an artist, you're like, I'm horrible. This sucks. This is horrible. It's most of that is in your head. You're never as bad as you think you are. And on the converse side, when you feel a little bit too proud, you got to realize that, there's always room for improvement. I'm not awesome, perfect, amazing.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. So I think that is an important thing that for people to kind
of
keep in mind.
I think my answer to this question would be something along the lines of, it's important to know things or get like the viewpoints that are, I don't want to say like opposite, because I feel that limits it, but like not just in like a debate. Like if you're very liberal I think it's important to know the conservative argument of something and vice versa, but not
Mhm.
just that kind of diametrically opposed thing. So like I think it's important for artists to know about science, which seems kind of opposites, right? And
Yes.
vice versa, you know. If you're really into English, maybe math is something that like scares you. You don't
Mhm.
need to be good at it, but I think it's important to like expose yourself to the things that
Yeah.
feel the furthest away from your interests. Especially because, just speaking as an artist, knowing a lot about non-artistic things only then serves to improve your art. And I
Yeah.
think um and I've heard this from people who aren't necessarily artists but who like art. You know, like my dad is a physician. You know, I have friends who hang around art communities but aren't artists themselves. And things that I've picked up from them is like being able to appreciate art gives you a greater appreciation for just
Mhm.
the experience of life. So it goes all ways, right? If you're
Yeah.
really into science and figuring things out, it's good to like have an appreciation for literature or music or
Mhm.
something, you know.
If I didn't decide to start looking in and researching, Asian American history, I wouldn't have come across this story that has
Yeah. Yeah,
motivated me over the past few months. One of the things
exactly.
I was speaking in front of a high school art class, mostly seniors and stuff like that. And one of the questions I got was, going to art school, what classes do you think I should take? That were most beneficial to you, or that they thought I might have
Mhm.
gone to high school, whatever else. Where they were expecting some sort of, I'd take anatomy class or take this, or take a sculpture or whatever.
Mhm.
And what I told them was like, you know, you're here in this art class because this is something you're already passionate about. You will learn art by hook or by crook. Like you will figure it
Right.
out. Um, but take take that business class, take that marketing class, take that accounting
Mm.
class, take that finance class. That right now in high school, you're as a creative in high school, you're like, that's just math. You don't need that. But take those other classes because you need that.
Yeah.
You want that. You want those things that are not in your main tunnel vision, right? That you're focused on. You want a little bit beyond. So I absolutely agree with you in what you're saying about just spread it open a little bit. Take off the blinders. Um,
Mhm.
that's where inspiration comes from, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's all the other things.
Yeah, like if I wasn't open to the experience of other people, like I wouldn't be trying to share that message of acceptance in my comic either, right? So like
Right?
that
Yeah.
and political things or you know in this case like gender politics, that was never anything that I was interested in, but one
hmm
conversation got me interested in that and you know doing research and it just snowballed from there.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
yeah.
I,
But
I,
yeah, we're coming to the end of the show. Last thing I like to do is give you 30 seconds a minute, just shout out what you're doing, where people can find you, all that stuff. Also drop some of the links in you know descriptions and stuff on YouTube and podcast descriptions so you can
yeah.
click through. But let them know what you do and where people can find you and support what you your art journey.
Yeah. You can find me on Instagram.com, Tony_Moy. Twitter is TonyMoy88, and Twitch.tv/Tony_Moy as well. In fact, if you just Google Tony Moy and watercolor, I'll be the only person that comes up. So you can find all the other information there, from my TikToks where I do funny dances. Just kidding.
Nice.
I don't do funny dances on TikToks. But I do have a TikTok. If you're on there, you can look me up. It's all the same. You find me on one social media, you can, there's a rabbit hole that'll get you to all my others.
Heck yeah. Well, thank you so much for being a guest on Thought Balloons, Tony Moy.
Absolutely. It was a great time.
I've enjoyed talking to you, catching up with you. Um, and you know, you're always welcome to come back anytime you want. Hopefully, definitely little earmark a date once the comic's done. Come back and promote that here.
Yeah.
For the 5 people that listen to this podcast. But
hey, that's 5 more people, and those 5 people, I'm sure, know 5 other people.
Yeah, exactly. It's the Kevin Bacon effect.
Yeah. So it's really 25 people that I'm talking to.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for listening. Go check out Tony Moy everywhere on the internet, and we'll see you next week.